This happened to me just last Tuesday, and I can't stop thinking about it. I'll start this story by saying I'm a 30-year-old female who lives with my fiance and our 2 dogs. I have 2 huskies. My huskies are not guard dogs to save their life. They don't bark, nor do they howl. These dogs just love people so much. My brother-in-law and a few of my friends have walked in on multiple occasions, and the dogs don't ever seem to make a peep. Anyways, on to the actual story at hand. It's 8 p.m., it's dark out, and I'm home alone. My fiance had a hockey game. I'm in the bathroom with the door closed and the blow dryer going, so I can't really hear anything going on around me. That is, until I hear one of the dogs howl. I stop the blow dryer and listen, thinking that the dogs are fighting again. Then I hear a faint knock, and the dogs just start going crazy, barking and howling and jumping into the bay window so bad that I thought they'd break it. I'm just thinking to myself, what the heck is making them go so crazy like that? Maybe it's just a dog or a skunk. I decide to look out my bedroom window as it was the closest view to the front door for me. Well, lo and behold, there's 2 men in hoodies standing at the front door. They start knocking louder, and this time my 2-year-old husky jumps from the bay window to the front door and then starts growling and ramming his body into the door. Keep in mind, I'm watching all of this from my bedroom. As the dog jumps into the door, one of the men jumps back kind of startled, looks at the other guy, and they just walk away. I called my fiance to get home as soon as possible. I watched the 2 men in hoodies walk away down the road. They didn't appear to be selling anything as they didn't stop at any other houses. I was so creeped out, and I still am to this day. Thank goodness for my crazy dogs. I really have no idea what I would have done without them. I had recently moved to a new city where my sister and her husband lived as well. They were both out of state, and at the time I was home alone with their pit bull. A little history on the pit bull, just because it's relevant to the story. She happened to be a rescue puppy from a shelter and had a serious history with people of darker skin tones. I've never heard of this for dogs, and I'm not sure if the previous owners were abusive or what happened, but she couldn't be around people of darker skin tones without becoming extremely agitated. So I'm in our house alone taking a shower when I hear the door open, which is kind of strange because I know there should be no one else here. Quite naively, I must have left it unlocked. I hear the dog get up, start growling, and walk near the bathroom door as I open it to see who is there. I step out and see 2 large African American men standing in the doorway, entering our house and looking around. I'm immediately confused and I went to ask them who they were, because I didn't know if maybe they were friends of my sister's or her husband. When the pit bull starts growling and barking, she bounds towards them and looks positively vicious. The men look understandably terrified and run outside, slamming the door behind them. After locking all the doors and calling my sister, I find that they have no friends or acquaintances matching the men's descriptions, and she was pretty freaked out too. I still have no idea why they were there or what their intentions were. But it was definitely not fun being left shaking in a towel trying to collect my thoughts after that. I did call the landlord and the authorities, but we never heard anything back. So to the 2 random guys who broke into the house while I was taking a shower, consider yourself lucky. You could have very well became dog food that day. This happened in the early 2000s, and I was around 12 years old. My dad had passed away about 2 years before leaving my mom's sister and myself. To help cope me with my father's passing, my mom took me to the animal shelter to pick out a dog since having a large dog was something that I always wanted. In one of the cages was a small shepherd/husky huddled in the corner that I right away fell in love with. When this incident happened, he was only about a year old, 90 pounds, and my best friend. My mom worked nights, and my older sister, taking advantage that my mom wasn't home, would constantly leave me alone. I didn't really mind though because she couldn't be home to boss me around, since when she was home she would try to be mom, telling me what to do and when to go to bed. We lived in a small middle-class suburb with a low crime rate, and I wasn't really scared to be home alone. I was sitting in the living room playing video games, and I decided to get up and head to the kitchen to grab a drink. From the kitchen, I had a clear view through the back door, and I could see that the garage happened to be open. Thinking that I just left it open after putting my bike away, I headed out the door to close it. My dog was sleeping in the basement since he liked to lay on the cool floor during the summer months, and I didn't take him out with me. I step out the door and make it about 5 feet from it when I noticed in the darkness a crouched shadow moving in the garage. I froze, trying to get my eyes to adjust to make out what the shadow was. It finally hit me when I saw the figure stand up and turn towards me. I was terrified, and I felt like I had been glued to the spot. I knew that this person could see me since the back porch light was shining above me. At that very moment, the figure started running towards me. I was too scared to move and let out more of a yelp than a scream, but that was all it took for my dog to hear, and the next thing I hear is him behind me and snarling and growling. I could make out it was a man, but I couldn't see his features when he then froze, seeing this 90-pound beast right behind me. He turned and ran for the back fence with my dog right behind him. The guy made it to the fence, and since it was only about 4 feet, he then hopped it right before my dog got to him. After the man got away, my dog came running back to me, and we went inside where I barricaded the doors. I don't know why, but I didn't call the cops, and I never told my mom or sister what happened. One thing that really bothered me was that he had to have known I was inside, since I had the lights on and the blinds were open as well. So why take the risk to hit a house when someone was clearly home? The next morning, after my mom was home, I went outside to finally close the garage, and I happened to notice that the guy had been going through my dad's toolbox. I locked up the garage, and I never told anyone about what happened. I walked my dog to McDonald's and got him a burger and ice cream cone for being my hero. I felt like he really deserved a good treat after that, and I have no idea what I would have done without him. Thank God for dogs. This happened a few weeks ago, and I'm still a bit shaken up by it. My husband and I like to go on long drives to the desert with our dog. We live right outside Las Vegas, and we're very fortunate to live in a city with abundant beautiful areas to stargaze or use a telescope. My husband just got one for his B-Day in October, so he was really excited to finally try it out. We drove our Kia up to a popular overlook, and he took out the telescope. He showed me a bunch of constellations, and we saw a shooting star. The dog sat in the car with the windows rolled down. My dog is a B word straight up. They weren't kidding when they named female dogs that. She's an American cattle dog, and she saved my butt more times than I can count. She's very protective of both me and her dad as well. Anyway, my husband had to pee, and he told me to wait in the car for him. So I got in and locked the door. Meanwhile, I'm just browsing Reddit when I hear gravel moving. Thinking it's my hubby, I then remark, "Well dang, that was fast." Suddenly my dog goes berserk. She's snarling and barking, so I turn around and there's a dude that's not my husband. This guy was an idiot. He made the mistake of putting his hand through an open window with a crazy 63-pound dog. She's got his hand now, so he's screaming. I'm screaming, and my husband is yelling as he runs towards us with his pants half on. The dog lets go of his arm as the guy takes off as I call the cops. My husband tries to chase after the guy, but he's about 6'3" and 280 pounds, and this guy was fast. Anyway, the cops finally show up and they tell us they'll look out for him, but to maybe stay away from that area at night. The cops in our town are a total joke. Our wonderful doggo got a cup of Dairy Queen that night. She really earned it. This happened several years ago. I'm a short, petite woman, and at the time I was in my mid-20s. I lived alone with my dog Blake in a small neighborhood of townhomes. My job required me to work out of the office in different areas of my community, hosting events and such, so it was pretty common for me to be able to stop by my house midday to let my dog out. For context, Blake was a Vizsla, but was quite tall and large for his breed, and all muscle. Blake was trained but independent, and not very well behaved whenever people would knock at the door. He also had a very intimidating bark. One summer day, I came home in the afternoon to let Blake out and grab a bite to eat. By the lack of cars, it looks like I might be the only person home in the neighborhood, with the exception of a guy in his 40s sitting in a termite spraying truck. I noticed him watch me as I walk in, and I get a really weird vibe from him. Not 5 minutes later, I get a knock at the front door. I hesitated but decided to answer. It was the termite guy. I normally held my dog back and made him chill, but this time I let Blake jump and bark all over the glass of the shut screen door. The termite guy was obviously surprised and looked at Blake for an uncomfortably long time before finally speaking. He asked if I had a screwdriver he could borrow. This seemed odd to me because 1. Why would he need one if he's just spraying the outside of homes for termites? 2. This really seems like something you'd already have in your company-owned work truck if it was something you really needed for your job. I should have just said no and shut the door, but I told him if he'd walk away I would set one on the front porch. Otherwise, if I opened the door, my dog would probably attack him. He walked off, and thinking I shouldn't be rude, I tossed the screwdriver outside the door. Well, he never came back to use it. I still wonder what might have happened if I hadn't had Blake there to intimidate him. So I don't really know what the creepy termite guy was up to, but I'm really glad I never found out. This happened about 2 weeks after I bought my first home in December of 2010. I was 22 years old, and this was the first time I had ever lived alone. About 9 to 10 days after moving in, I adopted a dog that my sister and mom saw at a local animal shelter. An abused breeding male Cocker Spaniel. He had matted hair down his spine and everywhere else, 12 pounds underweight and wormy. I named him Jack, and he's still sleeping next to me today as I type this. The house that I bought wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it backed up to an elementary school's playground and cameras faced my backyard. It was about a day or two before Christmas, so my office was closed and I was home. The way my home was set up, to the right of the fridge was a window looking out to my front porch, with my front door at a 90 from the window. This is where my kitchen table was. If you were in the middle of the kitchen and looked to the left, there was a second living room and side door with a half window. This was the only window that I hadn't installed blinds on. You couldn't see the kitchen table from the side door. So I'm sitting at the table looking through mail or something, and a shadow passes over my papers right in front of me. The blinds were closed, but if you were on my front porch and close to the window, your body would create a shadow. I don't know why, but I felt uneasy. No one should have been there. So I dropped off my stool to the ground and kinda peeked at the crack in the blinds. There were 2 men that I didn't know on my porch. One was really big, wearing a white t-shirt and jeans, but I never saw his face because he was facing my front door. The other was wearing a red baseball cap and a really baggy red shirt. Honestly, at first, I thought that they may have a legit reason to be there. I'd already had one guy looking for his dog before, but I hear the big one then say, "Dude, go around. Go out back." The red shirt guy walks away, and I lose sight of him. I leaned to my left and saw the red shirt guy come up to my side door. Alright, this is creeping me out now. Then suddenly they both start slamming their hands into both my front door and my side door, just pounding so hard that my little tiny house was shaking. That's when this sweet little underweight Cocker Spaniel that I hadn't even had for a week loses his ever-loving mind. He starts baring his teeth and runs directly at the side door because he can see the guy, just the loudest barking I've ever heard him do. Red shirt then yells, "Holy crap, dude, she's got a freaking dog!" and tears off running, with the big man following behind. I was so grateful to Jack. If he hadn't have been in there, those guys would have made it in for sure. It was an old little house built in '55 and still had single pane windows. I filed a report with the police, but I never heard anything back regarding the men, which was okay because to my knowledge, they never came back. I moved away 5 years later. Jack saved me that day. He's been treated like a prince ever since. But I think that he knew that I was his person from day one, and nobody was going to mess with his human. So white and red shirt dude, don't come back, cause Jack is still here and he'll definitely tear you up. This happened a few years ago, but I've just now decided to post it. After moving out of my neighborhood, I realized just how nerving the experience actually was. A few years ago, I was living in a bit of a rundown apartment complex. The town was a safe, everyone knows everyone type of town, but if anything bad was to ever happen, it was always in my neighborhood. I also used to live alone. I'm a young female for context. One night, I was getting off at around 1 a.m. from my job at the animal hospital. This was a fairly normal shift for me. I'm just driving my tiny compact sedan and I pull into the cul-de-sac that leads into the entrance of my neighborhood. I see a large white suburban SUV parked in the circle. Now, that's not too unusual. That's usually where people go if they're meeting someone and they don't want to go all the way into the complex. But then it started following me. The windows were tinted so I couldn't see inside, and there's no lights in the parking lot of the complex. I pull into a spot across the street from my building, assuming and hoping that the SUV would continue to pass. I'm facing another building. Bad move. The SUV stops his car perpendicular to mine, completely blocking me in. Crap. I keep the car running with the lights off and I get my phone out to call 911. There was no way I could get away. I had a brick wall in front of me, cars on either side, and this creep behind me. In order to get to my building, I would have to pass this car. I have never been this scared before in my life. I was a sitting duck waiting for some faceless monster to emerge from the SUV and attack me. Unfortunately, the combination of the long shift and my car charger recently breaking, my phone was dead. This was double crap. Then I hear my dog Tito growl from the back seat. I thank my lucky stars that I brought him to work with me today. He was so quiet this whole time that I almost forgot that I had him with me. For some context, my dog is a pit bull, Dalmatian, and Jack Russell mix. He was also quite feral before I got him. He's quite small, only about 35 pounds, but it's 35 pounds of muscle and extreme territorial behavior. Most people don't really realize how small he is until he's right next to them. At this point, the SUV has had me blocked in for about 5 minutes. He sits up, knowing something is wrong, and begins barking, snarling, and attacking the back of the window. Now, for a small dog, he has an extremely loud and very powerful bark. No one had gotten out of the SUV yet, but Tito is chomping at the bit to get his teeth into whoever was inside. At this point, the SUV books it, pulls a U-turn, and drives right past me. It then sits at the entrance where it was before, facing my car. I wait around another 5 minutes before the car turns around and drives out of the neighborhood, totally out of sight. I sprint into my apartment with Tito in tow and lock the door right behind me. I didn't sleep that night. I hated that neighborhood. I never felt safe the 2 years I lived there. In hindsight, I should have called the police, but I really just tried to convince myself that it was just a misunderstanding. Thankfully, I live somewhere that's actually quite safe with my boyfriend and a very large male roommate, and of course, my little Tito. I really have no idea what I'd do without him. About 5 years ago, our family had a really nasty issue occur. I'm honestly only here today because my cats are the greatest pets I could ever have. I lived with my mother until I was 18 years old. Her family lived nearby and it wasn't uncommon for relatives to often visit us. One of those relatives was my older cousin named Alan. He came by mostly on weekends. Now, Alan was a druggie and a drunk, but I treated him with the same respect and trust that I would anyone else in the family. That is, until one day. He came over to visit my mom and get some food. I'm sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. He walks over to talk to me and my kitten Luna totally flips out. Now, this is a 2-month-old little black cat, sweetest thing ever. Doesn't scratch, bite, or anything aggressive. She's absolutely perfect. But when Alan approaches, she lets out this unholy growl. The only thing I can really compare it to is a dying cornered animal. It really scared me, and at the time I thought I was going to crap my pants. Alan keeps approaching. Luna, sitting by my feet, suddenly jumps into the table and arches her back. She puffs out her fur and then snarls and shrieks at him. Alan backs off and then leaves without getting his food. Literally 2 minutes after he's gone, she's back to being my little angel. The same thing happened that next week, except this time I'm watching TV on the couch and Luna's in my lap. My other cat Coco is on the armrest. Alan shows up and tries to get near me. This time, however, both of my cats go insane. I was horrified enough myself that I didn't move. Once again, Alan leaves immediately. Flash forward a month later. I'm home alone. Alan knocks on our door and, me being cautious, I answer with the chain on. He's asking me for food and to take a shower. I tell him to come back when my mom is home. He doesn't even get a chance to respond. Luna wiggles out and begins to circle him, growling. He reaches down to grab her and she immediately goes for his hands. He has her for all of 2 seconds before she lets go and runs back inside. I slam the door and then call my mom. She tells me to lock all of the windows and if he knocks again to call the police. I check outside and Alan is now gone. I remain on the alert until my mom gets home. He still isn't back. We go to sleep thinking everything's fine and everything's okay now. Well, that night my mom gets a call from her sister. As it turns out, Alan tried to apparently kidnap my other cousin Kelly. Not only that, the police went to his apartment after the attempt and they found someone in his tub dead. Things come to light after this. My cousin wasn't just a druggie and a drunk. He was also a murderer and a sex trafficker, and my cats knew it. Not the facts, but they sensed what he truly was and protected me. I know I'd be dead if it wasn't for them, or worse. I don't really know where Alan is now. My entire family is on the lookout for him, and not to take him for court, if you know what I mean. Alan, wherever you are out there, please stay the heck away from me. This was about a year ago. I had just gotten married, and though we were rich in love, we were far from rich financially. We lived in a dilapidated old house my husband had borrowed from his late grandparents' estate until we could get on our feet. It was in a bad neighborhood, mind you, but we were surrounded by good people. I actually grew up in a crime-ridden country, and honestly most of the USA, even the bad areas, are heaven for me. So I was very cautious but never completely uncomfortable. My husband is a firefighter, so he works 24 hours at a time. My biggest comfort was our 65-pound pit bull named Candy. She was an absolute sweetheart, and unless you were a squirrel, she would never hurt you. She had taken a liking to me since I moved in, and when my husband started working 24-hour shifts, she would always follow me around the house, never once leaving my side. There was one evening when a really bad storm broke out. They made Candy nervous, so when she started acting up, I didn't really think too much of it. I was playing video games when I heard tapping at the window. Every time I paused the game, it would stop. I assumed it was just a tree hitting the window in the wind, but I decided to switch off the light and the TV in that room just in case. I went to let Candy out for her last potty break for the night. As soon as I opened the back door, she dashed to the right, and to my absolute horror towards the window that the tree was tapping on. I didn't hear anything weird, and the yard was way too dark to see anything. I called her back inside and made sure to lock everything up. I texted my husband, but he was on a call and he didn't get back to me for quite a while. Candy and I went to bed. I must have dozed off for a while, but I was then awoken to Candy growling really low and deep. I'd never heard anything like it before. I knew something was up as soon as I heard it. I stood up and grabbed a machete and stood still listening. Then Candy went ballistic. She went running from window to window throughout the entire house, barking and growling. I was dialing my father-in-law knowing he'd get there before the police, when I then heard a window smash in another bedroom. Candy was there in a flash, although I desperately tried to call her back, afraid that they'd shoot her or hurt her. I then heard a scream and more smashing glass, and then yelling getting further away, then silence. I crept to the window, and there was blood everywhere. Candy had a bloody shirt sleeve in her mouth, and she was wagging her tail sitting in the backyard. She had been nicked jumping out of the broken window, but was otherwise unharmed. My husband and uncle finally arrived a few minutes later. We never called the police. I really wanted to, but they're untrusting of local police in general, and they were also scared Candy would get put down. Needless to say, Candy got a puppuccino and lots of love, and not too long after that experience, we quickly moved. Rescue dogs are truly a special kind of wonderful. The scariest part of this story is their persistence, even though they could surely hear the dog losing it. My theory is that they were a local and they had met Candy out on a walk and had seen how friendly and social she was and hoped that she wouldn't actually attack. The other theory is that my husband had a really crazy ex at the time who was stalking him. She could have told someone that the dog is loud but not aggressive. I guess we'll never really know who it was, but I'm truly thankful for Candy. She's an incredible dog. This happened about 10 or 11 years ago. I was 11 years old at the time. My family had a ground floor flat, and the area that we lived in had just about 24 to 25 families. It was highly secure since it came inside a restricted area for outsiders, so people were rather careless with security issues. No one had a dog in the entire colony, though I really love dogs. A stray dog residing near our colony gave birth to 6 new dogs and kept them in a closeted, shady place very near to our house. We used to always feed the puppies every now and then, even though we didn't adopt them, but we really loved them a lot. It so happened that once one of my father's office mates came to meet him for some work. He had bought ice creams for me and my siblings, but I found his behavior towards me very strange. He would always look at me again and again and gave a weird smile which was very creepy. I felt very uncomfortable, but I was naive, and I thought that maybe the person was just strange by nature, and I dismissed any bad thought. After a few months, it was summer vacation. My dad was out of station, and my mom took my older sister for a routine checkup. It was just me and my 5-year-old brother home at the time. I had locked the main door. After some time, somebody rang the bell. I saw through the peephole, and it was the same person. My dad's workmate. At first, I got a little freaked out, but then I thought maybe he isn't aware that my parents aren't home. So I told him through the window, which is very near to the main door, that I can't open the door as my parents aren't home. He answered that he's aware and that's why he came. He then told me that he was in love with me. I found this so puke-worthy since I was only 11 years old back then. I refused. He started banging on the door very badly and tried to break the window. I got really scared, but at the time we didn't have any phones, and no one from the neighborhood would be able to hear me if I shouted, since even the nearby houses were also a little far away. My younger brother, who was asleep at the time, then woke up due to all the noise and started crying. I was helpless, and I didn't know what to do. I was on the verge of crying. Then all of the stray dogs started barking at him very profusely. I went to the window and saw all the dogs growling at him, and before they could jump on him, he fastly got on his bike and rode away. After my mom came back, I told her everything that happened. My dad was called immediately, as well as the police. Legal actions were taken against the guy, but I can never thank those dogs enough for what they did. They truly saved us that day. Thank God for animals. So while I was at school, I decided to get a job at a small grocery store in my town. My manager was pretty flexible with my schedule, and I needed the cash for gas. I got trained by this guy who kind of gave me weird vibes, but I figured he was just super socially awkward. Eventually, I got pretty comfortable with him being around, and in fact would ask him for help with anything I didn't know because he knew everything there was to know about the job. A couple months after I started, my boss had called me into the office, and as soon as I got in, she was crying. Another store manager was there too, and he was also quiet and visibly shook up. They told me that the guy had turned himself into the police the night before for murder. There had been an infamous murder in the town over 4 years ago, where a woman had been stabbed while jogging in a trail at around 7 p.m. that night. It was a cold case, and pretty much everyone had moved on from it. Apparently this guy had done it and kept it a secret for 4 years, but the guilt finally got to be too much. The worst part is that no one would have guessed it either. He was always nice and very helpful with everyone. The customers were so upset by it for months. The week before he turned in, he bought me a cherry wine soda because I never had one and I had to try it. It took me a really long time to be able to wrap my head around this. It's truly scary that you never really know who you're around or what they're capable of. Please be careful out there. You just never know. In July of 2017, 4 teenagers went missing in New Hope, Pennsylvania. I worked the overnight shift in the area, and from around 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. we get all types of different people. Normal obnoxious drunks, cops, and the occasional construction worker/gardener in there for their morning coffee. So when yet another customer came in covered in dirt, I figured he was just a hardworking man in a blue-collar job. He had been in before, so we made small talk, and he went on his way. That was Friday. I didn't see him on Saturday, but then Sunday he was in again. He got food and a drink, and after the normal, "Hi, how are you?" he went on his way again. Monday comes around, and I'm working like normal, when a few cops come in for coffee, and you can tell something's wrong. "We got a lead on one of those missing teens," they said solemnly. "We're searching a farm down the road." All of our hearts began to sink. It had been days since they were missing, so we were slowly losing hope, but this confirmed our worst suspicions. The cops were out there all night long, stopping in occasionally to update us, whether or not they were actually supposed to. They brought in dogs, and they eventually found them, 12 feet down and covered in concrete. It was bad. At the actual scene, they could only identify 2 of the teens based on their clothing, but there were enough bones to imply that all 4 were down there. Everyone was devastated. Then the cops asked for our security tapes. Why? We asked, confused. It was then that they revealed that the killer, a guy named Cosmo DiNardo, had in fact been in our store Friday night and again on Sunday. His cousin actually helped him kill, but he wasn't in the store. Well, the man covered in dirt was the murderer. I was totally floored, and when I left for work, I looked up a picture of the man that they arrested. It was him. He was covered in dirt because he had just buried the bodies. I couldn't believe it. I had made small talk with him, and I even wished him a good day. I've struggled with mental issues for most of my life, and I've ended up in mental hospitals because of it a couple of times now. While there, I made a couple of good friends, and we would all tell each other stories and random things about us. One of my friends had briefly been in jail with Cosmo DiNardo. Apparently, even though he seemed completely normal when I met him, he's completely lost his mind, lashing out and talking to himself. The whole shtick. I just really can't believe this happened. Disclaimer: I am no longer active on OkCupid. On to the story. This was in 2015. I wasn't really actively looking, but I would pop on to OkCupid every few weeks to see if anything interesting was ever in my inbox. Being female, I had a very active inbox. I noticed an email from an interesting, fairly local guy. The email was alright, asking about polyamory, which I don't mind talking about if the person asking is sincerely interested and respectful. We got to chatting. I had zero/romantic sexual interest, but I thought this could be a cool friendship. After a few months of chatting, he found me on the Book of Faces. He asked me if it was okay to send a friend request, and I agreed. We'd been chatting and getting along really well, and he seemed like a nice person. A little weird, but that's okay, because I'm a little bit weird myself. No big deal. We continued to chat here and there for about 2 years. Send birthday greetings, just the casual friendship. He has asked me several times to meet up and hang out. I've considered it, but at the time, I was running my own business and working upwards of 70 hours a week, plus maintaining my own home, raising my younger child, and trying to balance 2 partners and an extremely needy, demanding workaholic client who had no boundaries. So the meetup never occurred, but we kept in touch online. So late last year, there was a news story that broke out about a man and his girlfriend raping and murdering her young teenage daughter. I never connected the name until a friend contacted me and then said, "Oh, I see you're friends with so-and-so. Did you see the news?" The news stories all used his full legal name, not his nickname, which is why I never connected the two. It was him. My then online friend of about 2 years had beaten, raped, strangled, and then even dismembered his girlfriend's teen daughter with the girlfriend's help. He's made several statements since then stating that he's always had this rape/murder fantasy and that this child was very sexual and that it wasn't fun for him to murder her. Well, not as fun as he thought it would be. To this day, it still sends chills down my spine. I dodged a bullet. Big time. Be safe out there, everyone. You really never know who's on the other side of that keyboard or phone call. And dude, I really hope we never meet again. My girlfriend and I took some time out to do some backpacking and travel the world. We went to some incredible places and met some interesting people, but our most interesting story is probably this one. As I said, we went all over. However, we're both pretty good at reading people and staying out of trouble, so we never had any major incidents. We were on a fairly tight budget at this point in our journey, as we had recently been to Japan and wanted to chill for a bit before finding some work in Vietnam. We decided to volunteer on a Cambodian island. It's a bit of a luxury island full of resorts that we couldn't normally afford to stay at, so it seemed like a good gig for us at the time. I worked behind this bar at this resort, and my girlfriend worked at the restaurant. In return, we got to sleep in the dorm and got our own meals for free. The manager told me that since I was working behind the bar, and the Scottish and English guy who lived on the island would likely come and see me, and that his name was Dog. It didn't take very long for this to take place. A fairly old guy in his late 50s, early 60s came into the bar. He was quite tall and still powerfully built, and was accompanied by a massive Rottweiler, which he quickly told me was also called Dog. We had a bit of a laugh taking the piss out of each other. He was making fun of me being Scottish, and I was making fun of him for being named Dog, and just the typical English BS. I noticed that he was always wearing wife beaters which said Dog's Offshore Bar, and it had a picture of his dog on it, the Rottweiler. I got to know a bit more about Dog the man. He used to work in construction and offshore, as did I, so we had quite a bit to talk about, and heaps of opportunity to talk, as he usually arrived for his beer at around 7 a.m. It was obvious he was an alcoholic, but he never struck me as a bad person early on, just a sadly complicated one, like when you talk to someone who's homeless. Anyone who's never been to Vietnam/Thailand/Cambodia or any Southeast Asian country will understand how rare it is to see a dog that's not some kind of street mud or a tiny pet. Dog's huge dog would stand out even in Europe, however. Even for a Rottweiler, this thing was huge. Massively muscular with a metal chain. I guess it was to give some semblance of control if it was to ever kick off. I really like dogs, so I was quite interested in what this huge dog was doing on the island, and I always made sure to have some water out for it. It was friendly enough, but never left his owner's side, and it seemed to be a working dog. In terms of its intensity, this thing was clearly a guard dog. As it turned out, the dog was actually a Finnish drug dealer's dog, and that Dog had bought him. He told me that the dog had an attack command, and kept him primed by using it often on other island dogs. He told me that his dog had killed multiple dogs this way. I didn't believe this at first, but there was an island dog that the manager would often leave food out for this, and this dog would usually come near the bar usually when Dog's monster dog wasn't out about, but that night he must have been hungry enough to brave it, and Dog hissed the command, and the Rottweiler bound for the island dog, knocking over chairs and all sorts until he called it off. It was pretty scary. One night I was sat at the bar talking with Dog about this job that I would soon be taking on at a digital marketing company. I was in talks with the CEO at this company at the time. It was for a digital marketing job in which I would be working from home or coffee shops updating and improving websites. He said it sounded made up and that the company was likely some kind of con to get my bank details. I told him it was a real company and that I had Googled it. He was really drunk at this point, and the restaurant was now closed, so my girlfriend joined us and we were all having a beer at the bar. He told my girlfriend how I believed everything that I read online and how I shouldn't do that. He said that people publish all kinds of made-up crap on there, and I asked what he was referring to, and then he just said,
"Never Google me."
So I was like, how could I Google you? Your name is Dog. If I actually Googled you, I would just see a picture of a dog. But then I remembered those tops he wore. Dog's Offshore Bar. So I then told him, I'm going to Google you, saying this while laughing. He was getting quite annoyed, but at this point, other than owning a weaponized canine, I thought he was pretty harmless. I was wrong. I began reading out loud the interesting things that I found out about this bar and some related stories. One of particular interest was about a conviction. The joking and laughing stopped, and I quickly stopped reading out loud. I looked quickly to my girlfriend and I could see the smile leave her face as she realized we were drinking with the killer. As it turns out, this guy had murdered his Thai wife and then been briefly imprisoned before paying bail, and then he fled the country before his trial. He had apparently stabbed her, and his alibi to the police was that he couldn't have killed her because he was on the beach at the time. He told us that he had been framed and that his wife's ex was in the police and that he had her killed before moving on. I was nodding along to everything he was saying and trying my best to show that I agreed with him, all the while making sure that the machete that I used to open up coconuts for cocktails was an easy reach should the beast be given any command words. He told us about how hard it was being one of the few white guys in a Thai prison, how he had to attack guards to get into solitary confinement and then they would beat him mercilessly. He told us that they used to leave Shanks in his room and then put him in the yard with pedophiles for him to kill. He told us that he had killed before he went to prison and that he had killed while he was inside, but that he never once killed his wife. His wife was a Thai prostitute that he met while trafficking women from Thailand to Singapore on his boat. The same one that he used to flee Thailand after his arrest and set up his bar, Dog's Offshore Bar. With a tagline like "Dogs are welcome," his wife must have been kept on leashes or under control. We both acted like we believed him, and eventually he left. The whole night, however, I was waiting next to the door for him and his dog to come for us. I even propped a bin up against the door so anyone coming in would knock it over so that we would maybe have a chance to react. I nearly attacked my friend when he came in. It was super messed up. We quickly decided to leave after this and only saw Dog one more time after that. My girlfriend was opening a can of coconut milk for curry, and he came by and jokingly asked if she needed a knife, and he patted his back pocket. This guy is actually known as Mick the Palm or Mick the Dog if you want to Google this. If you happen to Google Dog's Offshore Bar, you'll see what I did. He was living on a tent on the island with his dog keeping watch while he slept. I'm not really sure if he's still there now, but Dog, let's never, ever meet again. I was in a city far from my town in the Netherlands to play a show with my band. At the end of the show, a guy came up to us to say that he liked our music. He asked if we wanted to join him to have more beers in a bar downtown. We gladly joined him and went on our way. We could tell by his accent that he wasn't from this part of the country, and we asked why he was living here. Apparently he stayed after he did some time in prison. We continued to ask about it, and he eventually told us that he committed a double murder, served a total of 15 years, and didn't have any regrets. So we don't talk about it anymore, got really drunk at the bar, and after closing, we went on our way. We were staying at the place of a girl that volunteers at the venue we played at. She apparently was also a friend of the guy. On the way back, we looked up the newspaper article concerning the double murder, and we found it right away. We ended up finding out that this guy killed his neighbors, a mother and a son. First he killed the woman, then had intercourse with her. After that, he knew that he had to wait for her son to come home, so while waiting in their home, he decided to play video games. When the son finally came home, he met his end as well. As you can imagine, we were very disturbed by this article, and felt really weird for going out with this sicko. The next morning, the girl who was friends with the killer asked if we had a good time yesterday with the guy. We said it was all fine, but that she really should have mentioned his past before waving at us the night before. so she then reacts as if she doesn't know anything of what we're talking about, thinking the guy is just joking with us, and we show her the article. She's still figuring this out and decides to call a friend from the venue who apparently actually knows him really well. Meanwhile, we're thinking that he actually just joked with us, and if so, he did very well imitating the killer from the article. After a while, she comes back from calling and then just says, apparently it's true. She looked devastated. I really feel bad for her because she considered him a friend. She actually told us that he was even the only one she trusted when they went to a festival with a group of about 20 people. I can't even imagine what their first next meeting would be like. I really hope that I never meet this guy again, but if I do, I will definitely be nice and ask how he's doing. But I really hope that doesn't happen. So this process happened just a few months ago, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. So at the start of the year, we were introduced to all of our teachers, and all of them were pretty good teachers. That is, except Miss C. So we went through classes, and each one we go to, they have those cheesy beginning of the year introductions. It was quickly clear that her class wouldn't be a normal health class, as evidenced by the fact that during her introduction, she went off about how terrible her divorced husband was. So classes started picking up, and her insecurities somehow kept making it into the lectures. One day a few weeks into school, she just stopped showing up to class. You know, her job, and she did this pretty consistently. Now at this point, everyone was cutting her some slack because she was a single mom, but it just got worse. We would have to do whole units from a workbook with improvised substitutes. This culminated when Miss C missed 2 weeks of school for no apparent reason. Most of the class could totally see her mental deterioration. Me and some friends in class started noticing some form of distress from Miss C more, and more stuff about her personal life would leak into lectures that she was there. Suddenly it came to a head. She suddenly became distant and developed a tough shell around her. Miss C actually started coming to class consistently too. She started bringing her kids to class. I have a hunch that she started doing this to help justify her inactions to her employers. One day she sort of just broke down in class about her horrible husband not taking equal responsibility for their kids. It was a really bad joke at this point at just how long Miss C would actually last before being fired. Unluckily for us, it was way too long. We just sort of endured lectures from this mentally unstable woman. Mind you, she was doing a fine job at suppressing traits associated with that around other school employees. One day we come and she wasn't in class, breaking her streak of actually coming. We finally got our answer of how long she would last. A counselor walked into the room and everyone knew what was up. She was gone. So you want to know what went down exactly? She walked into her ex-husband's house on the Sunday before that class period. Her excuse to her ex was to deliver cold medication to her kids. After threatening to call the cops after her home invasion, she locked herself in the bathroom. She called the cops and unlocked the door to the bathroom. She then walked over to her coat, pulled out a gun, and opened fire on her ex's girlfriend, killing her instantly. Miss C was then pinned down until the cops showed up. That wasn't her first offense either. It was suspiciously close to the time when she hardly showed up to her job. She actually had several assault charges against her that she somehow managed to keep secret to her job as a teacher. Weirdly enough, students who didn't have her as a teacher didn't take her very seriously. It took less than 30 minutes after that info was made public to the students in general for them to make a meme page about the entire incident. It's weird how that worked, but it got taken down. Anyway, mentally unstable teacher who committed aggravated murder and let your insecurities leak into your teaching. Please stay away from me. This is one of those close call stories. I had been around 9 to 10 years old when this happened. In October of 2006, a mother of 2 kids that I went to school with had went missing on one of the bike paths that ran through our town. Initially, the police had suspected that it was her husband, but they ended up finding her body a few yards off the bike path, and everything was consistent with 3 murders that occurred in the 90s on a bike path in a town about 15 minutes away from mine. They had arrested a man for those murders without conclusive evidence. Anyways, My story happened about 3 weeks before this woman went missing. My dad and I were walking on the same bike path that goes through my town behind our high school, and it was only 5 minutes from my old house. We always came walking up here with our old golden retriever named Aspen. Off of this bike path was a hill, and sometimes we would go down it and walk along the woods towards a meadow. My dad decided that he was going to take my dog down it so that she could run down it a few times and it would give her some cardio. Anyways, my dad went down the hill, and for whatever reason, I decided to stay up. I'm just standing there for a few minutes, just looking around, when a man with a German Shepherd walks up to me. He starts asking me how I'm doing and if this is my favorite bike path. I answer him, and I was a bit hesitant because I had always been taught stranger danger, but I didn't want to be rude to him. While he's talking, 2 women walk beside us, and he asks me if they're my parents. I then say no, and he asked if I would walk with him and his dog for a bit because he really liked talking to me. I started getting really nervous, and I said no, but he kept insisting that I come with him. Finally, my 10-year-old head was like, this is enough, and I began screaming bloody murder for my dad, and he runs up with our dog while this guy gives my dad a really quick look as he's getting to the top of the hill and starts running away with his dog. I'm crying hysterically while my dad is calming me down and calling 911. One cop who was on duty near our location came to us, and he had a few guys on the lookout for this guy. My best description for them, other than the dog, was that he was a bit taller with a beard and darker features. Well, they never found the guy. Fast forward a few weeks. This woman goes missing. They end up finding her and get a bunch of DNA evidence. They find this guy that lives a few towns away, matches his DNA with the murders from the 90s. It's the same guy. He killed this woman and those other women as well. He lived an average life with wife and kids. No one ever suspected him of doing it. The guy that they had arrested in the 90s was released and given tons of compensation. When they released the guy's face on the TV, I couldn't believe what I saw. It was none other than the creep who tried to take me with him on the bike path. It made both my dad and I sick when we saw his picture. And to this day, we sometimes still talk about it. I really dodged a bullet. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. And remember, if you have your own personal scary story that you'd like to send to me with me to narrate on my channel, be sure to submit it directly to my website at southerncannibal.com. And before we bring this video to a close, I just want to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beryl S., Beth A., Kate E., Katrina T., Celeste S., Ellie S., Emily W., Heather B., Howard R., Joseph F., Lori J., Matthew B., Michael G., Steph L., Tammy S., Terry H., Too Etchy for You, and Victor F. Thank all of you so much for supporting me on Patreon. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thank you everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always stay away.